Hello all you Odin worshipping, mead drinking cosmonauts. As always, I am Cosmic, and today we're going to be reviewing The Great Whale Road, which is a new story-driven RPG with turn-based combat developed by Sunburn Games, and it was a game that I previewed a while back and finally has released from early access, and so let's get right down to it. The game places you in the role of a newly elected chieftain of your clan, and it's fairly cliche at this point. Viking games are pretty much the new zombies, I feel, this year, because there's so many of them, and a lot of them center around the premise of all your clan gets killed and you become the clan leader and you have to rebuild your clan, and that is very much the case in the Great Whale Road. Your chieftain and all of the leadership and all of the solid good warriors of the clan, they set off onto a pilgrimage and they are ambushed and killed by Saxons, and so you become the newly elected chieftain of your clan and you have to rebuild your clan from the ground up. It's clear that the Great Whale Road is heavily inspired by the success of the Banner Saga, and it is a game that is pretty much based on the Banner Saga in terms of its core mechanics. You have a town system which is top down, and you can visit the various things and do various things within the towns themselves. In between traveling to towns, you go onto this 2D side-scrolling screen where you watch your warriors row and travel on the boat, and then you also have the turn-based combat. Now, for me, The Great Whale Road does really well in its story. I thought it was well written. There was a lot of characters that have a good amount of personality. There's choice and consequences in there, although they are not as impactful as I would have liked. But I have to say that the story and the narrative for the most part holds up well. The art style as well of the game is something of a bit of a core feature and a selling point. It has a great hand-drawn art style, very much like the Banner Saga did. It is something that's really nice. The game soundtrack, the music, the audio effects, they all work well. They're not as standout as its competitors, but they do the job quite nicely. As an overall game, it's a very simple premise and it's very simple mechanically. It's one of those things where it's about the story and it's not about the gameplay, and I'll tell you why. Because the gameplay is actually quite limiting, and it is a little bit of a negative in terms of the overall product. Because if you talk about the main gameplay elements, you have basically point and click elements in terms of when you're in town, you can sell stuff, you can do a load of things, and then when you get back to your home, you are able to input various people into different aspects of, Viking life, so you can improve your food income and stuff like that for your village and make sure that your village survives the winter. And it's a little bit of a management game, but the management side of it isn't that in-depth. It's a very simple system, and that basically translates to the entirety of the game. The travel system is very much like the Banner Saga, where you just travel, you're watching them travel, and then you come up across the occasional event, and then you have to decide what to do. The combat is probably where the most of the gameplay lies, and again, doesn't have enough depth. This is mainly because of two reasons. One, you have a limited selection of weapons and armor to use. Two, there are not enough animations and abilities, so it's basically static images fighting each other, and on top of that, each character doesn't have that many abilities in terms of various battle skills that they can use, which is a real shame, and that means that the tactical variety of each and every combat scenario is severely limited, and that's a real shame, because I feel that if they'd put in a really in-depth combat system where each character had access to multiple weapons, multiple skill trees, multiple different skills, then you would have had a system that was really interesting to play. But you don't in this, and I have to say that I always thought that the Banner Saga's combat was fairly limited, and this takes it a step further, and it is very shallow, and that in essence creates a really standard, quite boorish, repetitive combat system that, while it works well and what's there is executed well, it doesn't have the variety and the depth that I would say a hardcore turn-based tactical RPG player would be looking for. This combat shallowness and the lacking of the tactical variety and the strategic side of any given turn-based combat, this is coupled with the fact that the AI isn't all that great either, and that is a real shame. Now, in terms of the technical quality of the game, it's one of those things where it looks great, it sounds great, and it runs really well. There are occasional UI bugs in there, but for the most part, I have to say that the game's performance works very well. It's a shame really that the Great Railroad doesn't offer enough variety. Yes, the story is linear and I understand that, but it would have been nice to have open world elements. It would have been nice to have a ton of side quest content to do, to be able to collect various new characters, various new resources, and of course weapons and armor. But that's just not in the game. You can't travel anywhere that isn't in the direct of the mission, and that's really limiting, and it feels almost like you are just watching this story unfold rather than actively engaging in it sometimes, and that can be quite off-putting, especially when you put it up against something like the Banner Saga that has really deep, meaningful choices, a combat system that is much more varied and has much more depth. And I feel that while I love the setting of the Great Railroad and I absolutely love some of the characters, there just wasn't enough there. There was not enough content, there's not enough choice, and it's something that really holds the game back. I can't stress enough that it is a good game when it's executed well, and there are some really great things in there, but there's just not enough of those. There's every section of this game, whether it be the resource management, whether it be the progression, whether it be the combat, there's just not enough to it. And that as a whole, when you put it all together, leaves you wanting more, but not in the good way. It feels like there's something missing. It feels like it just wasn't fleshed out enough. And while it is a good game, it's certainly worth probably waiting for a sale rather than paying full price at $20. Don't get me wrong, you're going to be able to put plenty of hours into this. You're talking maybe 15, 20 plus hours easily. But it's something that as an overall product and what people would look for, especially people who enjoy these types of games, who enjoy turn-based tactics games, who enjoy RPGs, in terms of those players, I think that it's one of those things where there's just not going to be enough depth in there for you. If you are someone who doesn't like all of the clutter that comes with a traditional RPG and doesn't like the amount of variety within a turn-based tactical combat, then this might be right up your alley because it's a straightforward, enjoyable experience. But if you are a fan of the genre as a whole and you're looking for something that you can really get your teeth into, then you might find that the Great Railroad is something that's a little bit lacking. And that is my review of the Great Railroad. Thank you so much for watching and listening. If you enjoyed the video and you laughed when my accent decides to call it Railroad instead of Whale Road, then please leave a like. Make sure to comment, hit the subscribe button, share the video if you so wish, and as always, I will see you next time.